With the recent cast announcements for Amazon's God of War adaptation, talk about the show is everywhere. But the biggest discussion, or should I say argument, surrounds whether or not the show is justified in its choice to go straight to adapting the 2018 game, skipping over Kratos' origins entirely. And I'm here to tell you, yes, this was absolutely the right choice to make. Let me explain, but first let me say I adore the Greek saga. I've played it since I was far too young to do so, and I would love to see a graphical overhaul for the series for modern hardware. Now back to making you mad. See, there are three main reasons skipping the Greek saga for now is the right call to make. Those reasons are narrative, budget, and medium. Let's start with narrative. First and foremost, any adaptation of any IP of any kind needs to achieve two things immediately. They need to convince existing fans who decide if the show is good based on its faithfulness, and they need to hook new fans who decide if it's good based on their interest. What this means is that both groups must be engaged for adaptations to succeed. If one, or God forbid both, aren't happy with the product is destined to fail. This has been seen time and time again with adaptations of books, animated shows, and video games. Amazon themselves have been on both ends of this, with adaptations like Invincible being extremely faithful and only diverging to improve story elements, add content, or adjust character dynamics, all primarily for the better, while other adaptations like Wheel of Time have flopped. God of War walks this line, and the success of its narrative and its ability to hook new viewers is entirely dependent on which setting they decide to go with first. And while I love the Greek saga and am a defender of its emotional storytelling that many don't give it credit for, I do not think it has the narrative strength to carry this IP into live action without drastically altering the plot of the first game at the least, and all the games at worst. See, Greek saga Kratos doesn't often make friends, and when he does, he kills them. He doesn't do a lot of meeting strangers, and when he does, he kills them. He doesn't often see living family members, and when he does, you get the point. Hell, in the first game, the first time we see him interact with another person, he kills a ship captain to get the key around his neck, an act he later admits was entirely unnecessary and he regrets.
It would have cost me nothing to show him mercy. His life was in my hands. To be so casually cruel, I showed him what a true monster looked like.
But in the moment, we see nothing to indicate this regret, which is okay for us fans, we get it, but that's not a strong start for general audiences. Add to that the fact that any dialogue in the first game is really just Kratos getting advice or abilities from whatever god is relevant to that level, and you don't have a strong enough hook. Compare that instead to the opening of God of War 2018. The game opens with a somber Kratos chopping down a tree and using it in his wife's funeral fire. He then immediately takes his son hunting, both to try and bury his own pain and distract his son from his. On this hunt, we see him struggle to be a gentle father, even losing his temper and yelling, before quickly correcting himself and adopting a kinder tone. His message remains, but the delivery is softer. Or the ship captain story. Imagine hearing it from Kratos directly as he tells the story to Atreus, Mimir, or Freya, possibly with flashbacks. It has more weight to it since this massive stoic man that we've seen for several episodes or even entire season by this point finally shows a moment of weakness and emotion in the presence of his son or friends. These scenes have a much easier time of convincing longtime fans and hooking new viewers than really just about any scene from the Greek games. Now, there are some that take issue with the Norse narrative solely because they don't want Dad of War or they think that Kratos is too weak. I don't really think this is a good argument, and I fear many of these people wouldn't be happy no matter what they did. The first game saw Kratos hellbent on revenge over the murder of his wife and daughter. The second game saw him, at least at first, angry at the rest of the Pantheon after they refused to help alleviate the nightmares of him killing his family. The third game saw Kratos willing to abandon his quest for vengeance if it meant having a second chance at fatherhood with Pandora. The point here is Kratos has always been the Dad of War, and he's still that same brutal, unstoppable Dad of War when he chooses. He's pretty much holding back in every fight against another god that we see, but the moment he lets loose, the moment his son is in danger, the moment he chooses to embrace the monster, he wins, often without struggle. Balder, Magni and Modi, Balder again, Thor, Heimdall, Thor again, and Odin. He holds back in every fight, not out of weakness, but for the sake of redemption, for the sake of being better.
We must be better.
We see this clear as day against Freya, when Kratos throws himself in front of a raging Atreus to save her and even give her an opportunity to take his life. Introducing general audiences to this character through a story of vengeance, murder, genocide, and pain, without this kind of character interaction, expression of regret, and desire for redemption to make them care, is going to be a hard sell even with the underlying themes of fatherhood that a Greek saga offers. But John Wick did it, you say. And yes, you're kind of right. But John Wick didn't kill the puppy himself when tricked by the mob, he doesn't kill innocent civilians, and he doesn't allow rage to consume him. He's focused, calm, and rational. In fact, his story is actually much more in line with that of Norse Kratos, a broken man who's lost his wife, trying to leave his old life behind and find redemption, before he's forced back into his old ways when strangers come after him. As a new father, a lifelong fan of the series, and a massive nerd who loves reading too deep into things, I just genuinely believe the Greek narrative isn't the play right now. I'm not a fan of studio execs that say they have to alter the story to appeal to a larger audience, and I don't like changing the story. And to start in the Greek saga would push execs to want to change too much, scale everything down, or outright bastardize the IP to make it work in live action and appeal to general audiences at the moment. Especially when you consider our next point, the budget. Okay, I'm gonna be throwing some numbers at you in this section, so tell me to stop if I lose you. But first, if you're enjoying the video so far or absolutely hate everything I'm saying, let me know your thoughts in the comments and hit that like or dislike button. Peak Game of Thrones budget was during the final season, at about $15 million an episode. Andor cost a massive $39 million per episode. And Amazon themselves have broken records with the most expensive TV show ever made at a batshit crazy $58 million per episode for season 1 of Rings of Power. None of these shows have the level of scale that a live-action Greek saga would require. We're talking kaiju-sized threats that he has to take down in very expensive fashion regularly. We're looking at near Rings of Power budget from the jump at the cheapest. In fact, it's probably comparable to the budget of the Monsterverse. Even adjusted for runtime, conservative estimates of the Monsterverse would put that well above what studios risk on non-household name IPs. And that's just the big gods and monsters. That's without talking about Minotaurs, Gorgons, and the insane set pieces or fights against enemies like Hades and Zeus. We could be talking record-breaking levels of TV budget here, guys. And Rings of Power likely only got that kind of funding because it's fucking Middle Earth. As much as I love Kratos, he is not the household name that Gandalf is. He alone cannot get asses in seats like Gandalf can. And even that failed. In all reality, they likely wouldn't want to give it the budget it deserves. And the budget issues go hand in hand with the narrative issues. If executives already weren't confident in the Greek saga's narrative, they damn sure aren't confident in it while understanding it could be one of the most expensive TV shows ever made. Compare that to the Norse setting instead. The vast majority of this story requires nothing more than a big gray man, a small annoying child, Viking armor, and a snowy backdrop. There's a dragon for a bit, yeah, a couple of giants, but still nothing compared to the frequency of scale in the Greek saga. Don't get me wrong, this show wouldn't be cheap no matter what setting they went with, but the Norse setting just doesn't come close to the Greek. For further comparisons, the Invincible budget is estimated to be somewhere around $1 to $2 million per episode up to season 4, which is expected to finally have a much higher budget of around $10 million per episode. It took 4 seasons of this show being a massive success. Vox Machina had to crowdfund their first season before Amazon even picked it up. Why am I bringing up animated project budgets now? Because we're in mid-transition to our next point, the medium. If you've been listening throughout the video, you've probably heard me specify that the Greek saga isn't the move right now, or that live action isn't the best choice. If you managed to piece it all together and know what I'm about to say, congrats. Almost nobody else has seemed to think of this. Animation.
How do you feel about war?
I want Amazon to greenlight an animated Greek saga. Adapt all the prequels, the main games, and for the love of fuck, bring T.C. Carson back to voice young Kratos. I mean, Ryan Hurst is fine too, but I'd love for Carson to get a return, partly so we could have all 3 Kratosi Kratos' active at one time. Amazon has shown they're interested in mature animation with Invincible, Vox Machina, and Mighty Nine, and are open to video game spin-offs if the show does well like Fallout. And you're crazy if you don't think they've noticed Netflix's success with animated video game adaptations like Devil May Cry, Castlevania, and of course, Arcane. Or, their own success with Secret Level. Granted, an animated prequel isn't totally safe from alterations either. All the previously mentioned animated game adaptations have seen substantial changes from the source material. However, with Amazon's history of keeping creators involved with adaptations, such as Robert Kirkman on Invincible, Todd Howard on Fallout, and Cory Barlog himself on the live-action show, it's a safe bet that the alterations would be relatively minor and simply for the sake of pacing, storytelling, or added content. That said, I still wouldn't be surprised to see entire fights get cut like Helios or Hermes. Hell, for that matter, I wouldn't be surprised if they passed over the prequels or just pulled the major aspects from them, like how Kratos was forced to kill Orcos in Ascension, or the death of his brother in Ghost of Sparta. And honestly, I'm totally okay with both of those changes. It's reasonable, doesn't compromise the integrity of the story, and is absolutely nothing compared to the number of massive changes a live-action Greek saga would have to make. An animated Greek saga is absolutely something we could get. We just need to ask for it. Stop getting mad about the live action and start asking for what most of us already agreed was best years ago. With audiences already having an interest and slight understanding of Kratos' history thanks to seeing a season or two of the live action adaptation, getting casual viewers to watch a more gory, merciless, and edgy entry would be much easier thanks to already having invested time into caring and learning about this character. Assuming it's a success, of course. You cannot fuck this up, Amazon. Do not Wheel of Time this shit. And that's my argument. It's not that I don't want a Greek show, it's that I just don't want it quite yet. And I want it to be animation. I want what we deserve. Plus, come on. Having a Greek saga be a prequel after every other game in the saga was a prequel, that's just full circle, It's fate. So now that you know why Greece isn't feasible right now, what can we expect from the Norse show? Well, we can probably expect it to be a much more faithful adaptation than most bother to be, thanks to Cory being involved, the story being cheaper to adapt, the critical and commercial success of the games, and simply due to the growing trend of more faithful game adaptations. I might be willing to go as far as to say this could be another Last of Us Season 1 level of faithfulness, with whole scenes being adapted one-to-one. At least I hope. Most of the narrative beats will likely follow the same general pattern, but I wouldn't be surprised to see greater emphasis being placed on the mystery of Kratos' past, as well as why he thinks Baldur is after him, so it can all be revealed through flashbacks and dialogue over time, similar to the ghoul's backstory in the Fallout show. That said, don't expect those flashbacks to be fully fleshed out Greek scenes. We'll probably see Kratos kill Ares, Athena, and Zeus, the big three deaths that happened in the main trilogy, but not the insane fights that lead up to them. We may even get scenes of his brother dying or him having to kill Orcos, as well as his family, and maybe even him swearing his oath to Ares. But I imagine that's about it. We won't see the Siege of Olympus, the death of Kronos, or anything involving Kratos' quick-time events in the Sheets. Only the core essentials to understand his past, pain, and goals. We also know we'll be seeing Norse gods sooner thanks to confirmation that Heimdall, Thor, and Sif have already been cast. We'll probably see them when Baldur goes back to Asgard, or maybe Thor's reaction after the Magni and Modi fight. The season structure is probably going to be one game per season, but personally I hope they decide to flesh it out a bit and give each game 2 seasons, with season 1 ending right when Kratos returns from Helheim to save Atreus and finally reveal his true nature. My biggest worry though comes down to the fights. Kratos himself is brutal, even when being the tamer version of himself. He's a trained warrior or Spartan general and a god that has the fighting spirit and mercy to back it all up. I worry they won't be able to fully convey this speed, strength, skill, and how Kratos is constantly holding back. And the other gods, well, they're gods as well. They're all just as destructive. Just as an example, the first fight scene with Baldur. Kratos gives him multiple chances to leave.
You should move on.
He tells him outright that he doesn't want to fight, and neither does Baldur. Even after Baldur hits him, he asks him to leave.
Leave my
It's only when Baldur makes it clear he won't leave that Kratos strikes him and literally sends him rolling. That punch needs to have the same build-up and the same release in the show that the game's version has. The same needs to happen the other direction too. When Baldur gets up and hits Kratos for real, send Kratos flying. Then show Kratos start to steadily get more and more serious in the fight as he slowly starts to go all out, ripping trees out of the ground, crushing boulders, and literally shattering the landscape like in the game. Really drive home the fact that that first punch from him was still nothing compared to his full strength. Or the fight against Heimdall in Ragnarok. Kratos throws the exact same sequence of punches every single time. Why? Because he's a tactical genius with a battle IQ higher than Toto from JJK.
My 530,000 IQ mental CPU.
He's throwing the same sequence over and over again because he's learning how Heimdall is dodging. Kratos doesn't have future sight like Heimdall, so he has to use tactics like this to figure out where he's going to be at a certain moment. And it pays off. Kratos actually lands a hit on him, which sends him reeling both physically and mentally. It gets in his head and it fucks with him. These fights cannot come off as just some pretty strong guys fighting. You need to show feats of godhood and brutality in the fights while also conveying the character's underlying humanity and mercy, if they have it, at the same time. And that's all I have. If you've somehow made it this far, consider hitting like and subscribe and letting me know what you think in the comments. Is Amazon making the right move? Do you think the show is doomed to fail? And do you hate everything I said? You can also come yell at me directly on Twitter at CinderFlames. Peace.